Force psychologists say the key thing to people becoming great at something is they have to be super interested in it. Because to be good at something, you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. You get super bored unless you're obsessed with it.
I'll never be in the NBA. It's not because of my height. It's just because I don't care enough to be good at basketball. You'll never find me dribbling a basketball, but I'll sling some code it until 12 o'clock because that's just something that resonates. I've gotten good that way because it's a passion.
Welcome to Tech Council, your go-to podcast for mastering the art of building in the enterprise world. Join hosts Duncan and Jason Ehmke as they unpack the strategies, tools, and insights you need to drive innovation at scale. Brought to you by DevGrid, we're here to empower developers, tech leaders, and enterprise builders. Hit subscribe, and let's dive into today's episode. This is our first podcast. We're doing this podcast, Tech Council, building in the enterprise, trying to talk about things that matter to people that work in these big tech organizations, right? Like we've all heard the stories of, people working in Silicon Valley and other startups, but, I know we had a lot of conversations that when we worked at the banks that people just didn't get it, right? And so,
there's a lot of problems that happen in enterprises that don't happen in small startups. There's regulations that people aren't aware of. There's hoops to jump through that you wouldn't have to in a startup. So it's a different world, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's fun. It's fun to do both. And kind of, I think one of the things we talked about in the past that, we learned is they're so radically different and yet a lot of it's the same. And so I think that'll be a theme we probably hit on a lot. So, but the topic we were going to talk about today, right? We wanted to kick off, what do we want to start with? And one of the things I think, if I can frame it up and then let you jump in and kind of clean up whatever I say, kind of when you're trying to do something new in a big company, right? And how do you go about doing that? What are the, we use the term interdepartmental change, but it's having the authority versus the influence and all those things. And wanted to kind of talk through practical steps to help people navigate that, right? Is that what you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, change is scary. And when you've got somebody who is coming in who has some crazy ideas of change, it's, hey, hold on, don't rock the boat. Things are working right now. Why are you looking to change anything? And so there's a lot of resistance because things are working as far as they can see. But, I think there's a lot of hidden pains that you don't see because things are quote unquote working.
Sure. So, status quo is powerful, right? Inertia is powerful. So let's think about it, right? If we go back to some of our, times at big banks or startups, try to picture, change that we got off the ground or didn't get off the ground, as it were. Kind of the way I think about it is, the advice I give people is, you have to understand your stakeholders, right? And I hate that term because it's so kind of cliche, but who are the people that matter, right? So if you're trying to, I think back to a time, at one of the banks, we wanted to use a cloud CDN, right? We won't go into detail. Well, we can say CloudFront, right? So we wanted to use CloudFront on top of S3, and there was a different CDN provider that our security organization was very invested in, right? And so we had to figure out, and the reason we wanted to use CloudFront was because we were transitioning to a static UI implementation, right? It's getting away from runtimes and all that type of stuff. And we wanted to have the control that using CloudFront directly would give us, right? For routing rules and all that type of stuff.
Well, people care about different things. You got an org that's focused on purely security. And they have tools that check the box for them. And so something new coming in it's risky. It could be anything. It could be the best tool in the world, but if they haven't used it and they don't have a stamp to see that this will check the box for them, it's scary.
Yeah. So what do you do in that situation, right? Using that as an example, obviously without naming names, what's the best way to go about that, do you think, where you say, okay, how do I get security on board with this change I want to make?
I've had luck with, I've been through some of the same things that you have been. Typically, you have to start caring about what your stakeholders care about. But in order to do that, you have to know what they care about. I think you have to live a day in their shoes, so to speak, to really understand what makes them tick and what makes their department, care about with the same things that you care. You're just speaking different languages, but at the end of the day, you want the same thing. If you're speaking French, they speak Spanish. You're never going to be on the same page. And so you'll always be butting heads. So it's learning to speak their language and find out what they care about.
That's such a good point. I know when we talk to engineers, so often when they're having trouble either with their teammates or with product or the business or whomever, right? Like so often the conversation is like, hey, it's not about you. Like it's not about what you care about. It's about like when you're communicating with the other person, the communication is not for you to push your idea. The communication is to get them to understand and for you guys to get to a common place of alignment, right? And so
one of my tech leads is the same thing. To your point, is that they came to me with a problem, and I asked first thing is, what does this person care about? Well, I don't know. I said, okay, go find out, and then come back to the talk.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the way I approach these things, as you know, I often would be the person, one of my roles in some of these big organizations is the person to go and kind of drive alignment across of them and, strategic alignment or execution alignment. And my approach tended to be kind of that at a meta level, right? Which is to say, okay, what matters? What is the strategy here? How high up in the sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs do we need to go to get alignment with these people, right? So you're talking about security, think about where do they now join up at the organizational level? Is it at the head of technology? Is it the COO, CEO, whatever? And then like where organizationally do you start to align? Do you find commonality, right? And laddering up to principles is a great way to do that. If everybody, maybe your leadership has laid out a principle of being, cloud only or cloud first or cloud native or something along those lines, getting to that place and understanding, okay, how do I get in alignment with the top of the house? And then how do I find something that also links up with these partners that I'm trying to have them see my way in the world and try to help change to this thing that I'm trying to accomplish? Is it figuring out, to your point, what is it they care about? How do I connect it to what I care about? And then make those things feel the same. Obviously, they're not exactly the same, but you can overlap them and start to bring them in. I mean, it's a great technique, and that's what's worked for me.
Your target, your ally, right? It's you've got to again speak their language, know what they care about, but then turn them into an ally. You both want the same thing. You both want success, but unless you can turn them to your strategy and start talking about like, hey, what are we really talking about here? What capabilities do we really care about? And turn this person into your ally by speaking to them in their language. You can avoid all the escalation nonsense in the first place by just talking to them and turning them to an asset to you and the organization.
Yeah. It's funny, you say that, like, I've done both, right? Like I've done the scorched earth, let's escalate, let's kind of push people.
To be fair, that actually works in some cases though. There's a time
sometimes it's necessary, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You got to have a bulldozer to push through, and you've got to it's a wartime, peacetime thing. What are we really looking at to this? Do we need to push through at all costs? Okay, then you need a bulldozer. Do we need to make nice and build relationships? Well, that takes a little bit more tech. To be fair, that's harder. Sometimes bulldozing is the easy get things done, and you're going to repair those bridges later. Hopefully, cross your fingers. You can repair the bridges, but that's sometimes
the right move. It's rarely the right move. It's good to have it in your toolbox, right? Like it's like having nuclear weapons, right? Like
yes,
you really don't ever want to use them, but it's not terrible that people that you interact with know you have them. I think, but generally speaking, it's very difficult to do that in such a way that doesn't make you look terrible and isn't kind of toxic to the situation. And so,
right, you've got a lot of work to do afterwards to clean up that reputation that you've probably burned a little bit. But again, what capital are you spending though? Are you spending some of your reputation capital to get this through fast? And then you can make up for that later, or are you going to spend longer to build those relationships, build those allies, and negotiate your way through? It's just there's different tools.
Yeah, 100%. No, I mean I think it's definitely a thing. And like if you're talking to a tech lead or a director level or somebody like that in one of these organizations, and they're trying to bring this tool in, or I want to get the pattern changed. What's the first thing I should do? Like again, you come back to it and you say, what's the value proposition? Why are you doing this? Maybe really that's the real question. Like, why are you doing this? Make sure you can answer that really crisply and really clearly. And it can't be because, this is a cool tool that I want, right? Or some variation on that, which honestly, 85% of the time, that's all it is. It's just like, I just want to do this thing. And then of course it doesn't work because nobody else wants to do the thing just because you want to do it, right? And so it starts with having a good plan and a good why behind these things and then getting alignment. Like because I know one of the things we're going to talk about, right? Like, when do you get alignment and when do you just go do stuff, right? And I think starting with the alignment piece, as you hit a complex organization, I don't know exactly what the right size is. Maybe over 1,000 people in the company is kind of a good benchmark. Maybe it's smaller than that. I don't know. But like, once you hit what we would call an enterprise, like a complex organization, it's rarely the right thing to just go do stuff if it affects anybody else, right? Like, this is why service-oriented architectures and bounded contexts have evolved, right? Because there's like, hey, let's have our little bubble. Within that bubble, we can do whatever we want. But if we go outside that bubble, now it becomes this whole thing. And understanding those boundaries can be really useful.
Well, I think there's a time and a place for just doing things, even if it affects somebody else, because if it affects the greater good, and this is something that, hey, look, we're going to do this and we're going to ask for forgiveness later, we can make it right. It depends on the level of impact across teams too, because it's, what are you trying to accomplish? I think that's the first thing you have to look at there. Is this something that is a must-have? We must have this now at all costs. Again, you're going to burn some reputation capital, but sometimes there's a place to do things, to just do things, because, it's very commonly just doing things is a very good approach. But I think you have to look at what is the impact across the broader organization if you just do this thing, because it could affect somebody, but it could affect them in a positive way too. Getting that buy-in, that's a tricky balance.
Yeah, and to clarify, right? Like, when you say just do things, you mean it kind of in the meme way, right? Where it's like, you can just do things. You don't need permission to go and have an impact. You don't mean like, just go do something frivolously. That's not what you're saying, right?
No, not frivolously. It's not that. It's the, I think you have to look at the intentions, look at the impact of what you're trying to do, and is just doing things, is this destructive or constructive? But sometimes it's a gray area though. And sometimes if you don't know, well, that's probably the time to start bubbling it up and having a broader conversation.
So how do you think about telling someone, again, back to this kind of story of, I've got a tool, I'm an SRE leader and I'm trying to bring in pager duty. We don't have any sort of on-call schedule or anything like that. But, we aren't typically the organization that buys these things. My boss doesn't have a ton of budget. Architecture is telling me to go pound sand. Like, what's your advice? Obviously, you don't know the organization, but like, generically, what would you say to that person?
That's a tricky one. You've done that exact scenario, so I'm interested in hearing your perspective there.
That wasn't the deal, but yeah, I mean, I think.
What did you do? Because that's a real scenario. Like, what did you do?
Well, we cheated. The one you're thinking of, we cheated, but that doesn't, sometimes cheating's the way. Like, this is a crafty little thing, but we went through, what are they, I'm trying, without saying the name of the company, they have these resellers, software resellers, right? So, kind of these companies that have deals with every single enterprise in the world, and they're usually for small purchases where you wouldn't want to go and do a full contract and things like that. And so we snuck in some deals through that, which once the procurement people found out a year later, it was, I got yelled at. Actually, in my entire career at that company, I only ever got yelled at properly by one person. And it was the head of the chief procurement officer was not happy. He was pissed. So that was fun. But the way I would do it.
Example though of doing things that that could have had some buy-in because it could have affected multiple groups. So that's a good example of kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the good sneaky move where you're just going to be sneaky is not the right word. Maybe call it hyper resourceful. To do that again, I think you also have to kind of take an inventory of where you are, right? Like, what capital do you have, right? Like, this is one of the other things. If you start to fight the war the day the war kicks off, like, you're in trouble, right? Like, it's like Sun Tzu, whatever it is, like, all the different philosophers, is like, you have to plan for these things and you have to build the relationships and the credibility to go and affect change. You can't just be some punk kid off the street.
Who is this?
Yeah, exactly.
Go away. And you
Yeah. So the first thing I do, like you and I, like, we go in and we help companies, as part of DevGrid. One of the things we do is we do advisory services, right? Like, we go in and we help them with strategic planning and technology decisions and people decisions, org decisions, all that type of stuff. And like, first thing you do, whether is that or as a exec in a bank or somewhere else, is like, you start to develop a kind of a map of the organizations, the decision-making parameters. Like, what do these people care about?
Yeah, but so walk me through a little bit. Like, how are you looking at the right people though? When you're building your map, like, what's your strategy for coming through and finding the right people to work with on these? Because, you talk to security, that's one perspective. You talk to procurement, that's another. Mm-hmm. Engineering, that's another. But like, when you're building your map and navigating those relationships, like, what are you doing to identify those people?
Yeah. So like, I have my way, right? Which is somewhat idiosyncratic, but I think generally speaking, you go to the calls, you go to the meetings, you go to the conversations, and you listen for the people who seem like they have their head on straight, right? Like, and you always can kind of see it. They rarely are talking much. But when they do talk, there's authority to what they're saying. Everybody respects and listens to them. So, and what they're saying makes sense to you. They're not just a jibber jabber over there talking to say something and to be heard on the Zoom or whatever. And those are the people where I'm like, okay, I want to talk to that guy or that gal. Like, I want to know what they care about. And I just reach out to them. You just ping them and just be like, hey, I love what she said in the meeting. That was great. Can we chat about, come up with something useful to talk to, develop a little bit of a rapport, ask how you could be helpful to them. Like, hey, I'm in this organization. Like, do you guys need anything from us? Like, is there anything anything I can help you navigate? Just create that dynamic where, I'm thinking back to one guy in particular who was he was in the InfoSec org, but he was like cloud security, right? So there was like the infrastructure folks that ran cloud, and then there was InfoSec was a whole other group, but he was kind of the liaison that sort of was their security guy. And like, he was a great partner, and I watched him be super, super reasonable. And so anytime I ever needed something to change from a cloud policy standpoint, I didn't go to the cloud team and go to him and be like, all right, hey, this is the thing I want to do and why. And then how do we work? And then get him to understand the why and get him to understand how it will be better or not. And we work out of control and all those different things.
So I think that hits on a point that we were talking about earlier, is you're finding people, but you're turning them as an ally to the mission that you're trying to accomplish here. So I think that's a good example of you're building your army, to the terms that we've been using so far, is that you're building your allies, and you're building to find common ground. Yeah, for sure.
And the thing is people, if you start thinking about people in terms of not what can I get from them, but what do they care about? And in a corporate environment, people become very predictable, because most people's jobs aren't that complicated. I mean, the job itself might be complicated, but what they're after isn't complicated. It's usually baked into their job description if they're even remotely good at their job. And so, you get to a place where, like, I reminded of one meeting where you and I were going and you were presenting a new gateway solution or something to a bunch of leaders, and I was just kind of there to help. I didn't have any direct skin in the game, but we were able to predict almost to a T exactly what each one of those leaders were going to say. Do you remember that? Like,
yeah,
it's
like all about getting more work. You want more work done, and you want it to get done on this time, this schedule. It's security work. But it all boils down to the same things to every single group. It really is.
Yeah, it's fundamentally like, hey, how's this going to make my job? How's this going to make my job easier or harder? How is it going to help me tell the story of I'm doing a good job or not? And, there's a selfish incentive for everybody in these types of environments, right? Because everybody wants to keep their job. Everybody wants to get promoted. Everybody wants rating. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, all those things matter. But it's not a zero sum game, right? Like, that's the other thing is don't ever treat these things as zero sum games. Even in moments where it kind of is, it's not. Like, a corporate environment is.
Say more about that. What do you mean? Get into some details there.
Well, so like the cliche, not the cliche, but the kind of popular reference to that is like Simon Sinek's book on the infinite game, right? Like, his concept is saying, the whole point of the game is to keep the game going, right?
Yeah, because there's enough pie for everybody instead of slices of a pie. There's enough pie for everybody if you just know where to look.
Yeah, it's one of the main kind of fundamental philosophies in free market economics too, right? Like, there is no pie that everybody has to divide up. It's the pie will continue to grow if we all do our stuff. Now, I mean, setting that aside, like, you have to have that mentality, or else you get protectionist and defensive and all those other things inside of a corporate environment, and leaders don't like that shit. Like, they look at that and they're not happy with that, right? Like, if you see somebody being protective and defensive, it's a really, really bad look. And because the leader doesn't care, right? Like, if I'm at the top of the house, I want the company to be successful because that's what I care about. And if you're building your little fiefdom down there and you're trying to like fight for your piece of the pie in a counterproductive way that's self-centered, like, that's a really, really bad look, and people aren't going to give you the favor that you need to get the stuff done that you need. So you have to.
It's a give and take, right? It's, are you a giver or are you a taker? If you're taking all the time, people are going to see that you're just taking. There's a balance. But the funny thing is, though, the more you give, the more you get back exponentially.
It's so funny. It's like almost a religious principle, but it's so true. Like, in my career, the times that I was being openly ambitious were the least successful. Right? The times when I was actively pushing away from more responsibility and accountability in the sense of like trying to grab it for myself. I was I was genuinely not trying to grab more responsibility just piled my way. And so, and I've seen that happen with you too, right? Like, because when you're competent and you're not looking to grab things, everybody wants to give you more, because to them, they're like, oh, well, so-and-so will take care of it, right? Like, I know if I give this to Ehmke, he'll sort it out and I don't have to worry about it, right? And I know he won't turn into this little fiefdom. Yeah.
You're building capital. It's that generosity is, so to speak, is that, hey, Duncan or Jason or whoever it is, they take care of things. You build that reputation capital up, and so they're not going to be greedy. They're not going to be grabby, and it's going to be a very mission focused outcome.
That's a good call. If you're let's say we're talking to somebody that's relatively early in the managerial thing, they're working at Bank of America or Wells Fargo or someone like that. They're a tech lead, maybe they're an early manager, and they're saying, hey, I want to go and affect change. I see all these things that we could do. Like, where do they start? Like, what's step one?
I think I've had people ask me that question, like, how do I get this thing done? Okay, well, my question is typically, well, who do you know? Who have you talked to? And nobody. Okay, I'm not going to tell you who, but these are the people, these are the groups that you're going to need to navigate. These are the challenges that you're going to need to face. But there's no shortage of people who need help, and there's no shortage of people who are going to be willing to talk your ear off about the problems that they're facing. And so my advice to these individuals is be a problem solver. Work together. I am not your teammate. This person that you are working with, they're your teammate. Work together to solve the problems and collaborate on this. And it doesn't make sense to them at first, because it's, what? Yeah, you're solving the same problems, but work together. Be the person that they go to solve problems, not just get a job done. It's a distinction in the way that, can you solve problems, or can you get things done? Being somebody who can solve problems for anybody in the organization, building up that reputation capital, people just start to trust you more. And that trust it grows and it snowballs.
Yeah, for sure. That's good. No, I think that's really good. It's like, so often our advice, like, you reminded me of like conversations we have with engineers. We talk to these boot campers and people trying to get their first job. Just go do it. Go talk to people. Go build something. Like, the number of people that ask the question, hey, how do I get started as a developer? Go build something. Like, just go build something. Like, don't wait for anybody to give you permission. Just go build it. It reminded me
of a funny story that I had somebody come in, that early talent. They came in and we created their own little team, and I told them to just do this thing. I'll help you, ask questions. And so one of the developers, I applaud him, but he navigated all the way up the chain to a senior director and product to understand the problems that this thing was trying to solve. And so that's the attitude that was needed, though, because this person knew this job had to get done, navigated the organization chain to find out the person who can make the decision, and had no hesitation to do so. And I was reached out to afterwards and said, hey, did you know so-and-so talk to me? No, I was scared at first, because like, I thought this person was going to get a little upset. She said, like, no, this is awesome that the team is taking that initiative to just find the answers and cut the garbage of sitting with questions unanswered. So it's kind of the mantra of, you can just do things. Well, he did, and it was a little scary for everybody, but it actually turned that whole team into I can just do stuff within guardrails, of course. And we had guardrails, but that team excelled because of snowballing off that attitude.
It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, if you care about the right stuff, you can go talk to anybody about it. Like, that's the other thing. I was actually just talking to my wife about this the other day. Like, caring is a superpower in a corporate environment. Like, just GAF a little bit, right? Like, it makes a big difference, because so many people don't. So many people are just going through the motions, doing their job, doing what they're told, whatever. If nobody makes me do it, I'm not going to do it. Just caring about stuff and paying attention is honestly, like, you're already a B player just by doing that. Like, you don't have to be good at anything else. And like, to your point, like, you got this young kid comes in, doesn't know any better, is totally naive that what they're about to do is completely, like, not normal for a entry level engineer to go talk to a senior director in product. But that's super powerful, because they're earnest and they care and they're trying to do the right thing, and they, as they're not actually overstepping any boundaries.
They're self-imposed boundaries, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point, right?
The boundaries you're putting on yourself to get things done. And if you just say, what would I do? Who would I talk to if there were no rules? I'd go talk to this person. Then you just do.
Or if you have a bad boss, it's not just people. Sometimes you have a bad boss who's scared of you talking to their counterparts and things like that.
Let me talk to them for you.
Yeah. For any number of reasons, which is a thing. And you have to know, that's part of knowing your environment too, right? Like, you don't you don't want to put your boss in a bad place, even if your boss is kind of a dope and like making it like is like that controlling or whatever. You don't want to put them in a bad place.
Well, no, that's called out. I think it's what is the 48 laws or something like that. They were talking about always make your boss look good. I forget what, I could be wrong on the book, but it's if you make your boss look bad, well, that's actually really bad for you too, because they are embarrassed that somebody's outshining them. And now people know 9 out of 10 times people know who did things, and giving your credit to the will always work in your favor. It doesn't seem like that. It seems counterintuitive, but everybody knows at the end of the day who's the doer and who's the manager.
Yeah, I always found it weird, like the people that complain that the boss takes credit for their work. Like I always like it's kind of a corporate cliche a little bit, right? Like, and I never got that one. Like, yeah, it's his job or his or her job.
Yeah.
Right? Have you guys not read
that opportunity if it wasn't for him?
Like, but that's the point. Like you're that's the point. Like he's responsible for your output. It's like everybody loves OKRs and all those different things. Like, well, if you go back to OKRs, it's all derived from this book, High Output Management by Andy Grove, right? And the fundamental thing that Andy Grove said was that the output of the manager is the output of the team, right? And so, essentially in the lexicon of business management theory, your boss is to blame and to for all the good things and all the bad things that happen on his team. His or her team, right? So like people are like, oh, they take credit for my work. Yes, of course they do. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, that's their job. You should be happy that they're doing that. And to your point, if you have the right mentality in like kind of a gratitude and an openness, like it'll accrue to you. It's a positive thing. It's not like,
because at the end of the day, that's your job.
They got credit, you don't get credit, right? Like, what are you talking about?
Because at the end of the day, that is your job. Given the two choices to make your boss look bad or your boss look good, your job is to make your boss look good.
Yeah. For sure. Like, I don't know. People have weird relationship with bosses. Maybe, I don't know. Like I've never really had that dynamic, luckily, other than a couple of weeks here and there. In transition
that's
periods.
A common thing though. I've heard horror stories where there are plenty of bad bosses out there, but it's the same thing with the intentional effort behind things. It's an intentional effort to be a good manager or not. And so, it's easy to be a bad one. Too easy.
Yeah. I mean, we started the conversation off talking about like influence, right? Like influencing people for change. The first person you got to influence is your boss. Like all the stuff we talked about, were like understanding what's important to them, understanding what their success criteria are, all that type of stuff. Like that's the first place to start. Because if you don't understand that, you will cross wires and you will have problems. But if you can get in alignment with your boss, and even like, I wouldn't say the worst boss, but like as long as you don't have like top 1% terrible psychopathic boss, they'll all appreciate that, right? Like they'll all be like, all right, this is the stuff I care about. You're helping me with what I care about. Great. You're one of my guys, right? Like I'm all about
blindsiding. You got to avoid blindsiding, and you can't just do things in a way to not loop your boss in, because that's an easy way just to get the whole thing shut down is to blindside your boss. Like, hey, look what I did. Cool. Who's going to pay for that? That was going to be you. Sorry, no. All that work you did for nothing.
The worst thing that can happen is something controversial happens and the boss finds out about it from a peer and not from you. It's not good. Or his or her boss, right? Like that's not good.
But it happens far too often, and that there's the level of agency and then there's a level of bubbling up. Just doing things, as we've been kind of as a theme here, is great. Communication is number one, and not having the right communication, the right people in the loop are catastrophic to anything that you're trying to get done.
100%. What else do you want to talk about? Anything on this?
Well, I mean, where do you come up with the ideas for things? Like, okay, PagerDuty, for example, that was something that we've talked about already. Everybody comes up with ideas for things, but there's so much that can just get drowned out at a corporate or an enterprise. When you're navigating these things, and how do you know what's something worth the effort or not worth the effort?
That's a really interesting question. I think back to, my last corporate role, I was 2 down from the corporate CIO, right? So the guy that was the head of all the technology, I was 2 down from him, and he put out this multi-year strategy document. It was, PowerPoint slide, and it kind of tweaked it from year to year, but it was basically the same stuff. And I treated that thing like my 10 commandments effectively. And so I looked at it and I had the benefit of actually really liking it. And like the content was good, like it wasn't stupid stuff. And I was very aligned with it just philosophically with my own personal taste. And so I just treated that thing as, okay, this is the direction. This is where the boss wants to go. This is where he wants to take the technology organization, which was like 1,500 person organization, I think, roughly. And I was like, okay, well, this is my roadmap. Now I'm going to take each one of these, the strategic pillars and principles and outcomes and all that stuff. And I'm going to take each one of these and I'm just going to start to apply it to everything I'm seeing, like to my world effectively. And the things that are, maybe once or twice removed from me as well, the stuff that I can see that isn't directly mine. And then just kind of start to say, so for example, like we want to be cloud native. Maybe that's one of the things. It's like, okay, well, you got a bunch of VM based apps that are still sitting in the data center. Well, that seems like something that somebody should put some attention on, put some effort on. Now that's obviously a big one,
but easy though. But that's not too easy though. You could just say, hey,
no.
That's a big one. That's a big hill to climb of getting off of VMs. And so it could potentially be a multi-year, multi-million-dollar strategy to get off of VMs. So, I mean, walk me through that a little bit of things.
Well, that's where you got to know your scope and your, to use the geopolitical term, your sphere of influence, right? Like if you're a tech lead, not just a tech lead, but if you're like a tech lead or a senior engineer or something like that, and you start pushing a cloud migration, you're gonna struggle to get some traction there, right? Because to your point, you're talking about potentially tens of millions of dollars of effort, depending on the size of the thing, right? Like the migrations that I was helping some of these guys do, or helping advise. I mean, it was $5 to $10 million to do that work in terms of budget and corporate cost accounting. So that one's different. Like what I did with that in particular was actually I worked with my boss to kind of break down that strategy and all the other imperatives that we had, and to kind of come up with a more targeted strategy for his organization. Right.
So what I'm hearing you say is you take the big piece, the cloud native, the cloud migration, you start to break it down into more digestible chunks, because, one big massive move like that's just by itself impossible. Let's just call it impossible. Yeah. So you're breaking this down into chunks that are easier to sell, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it mirrors like the OKR process, right? Like we've all done, most people know that. If not, go Google it, whatever. There's a lot of good content on there, but it's like somebody sets an objective, and then there's key results against that objective. And then those key results become the next group's objectives, and so on and out. You break it apart into smaller pieces as you go closer to the ground. Yeah, it's the same concept. It's like, okay, that's like you say, like there's the 10 commandments is the principle document or whatever. And then, or maybe a better metaphor is like the Constitution is written with the framework for how to think about things. And then you go write your the Constitution's all about like, these really broad legal concepts. And then I'm saying you're legally allowed to park in this parking spot in this town. Right? Like there's the power to change, a constitutional amendment versus I'm going to change zoning on this lot. Right? Like an understanding kind of, there's actually a political theory word for it. It's called, I can't remember, but it's like you want the decisions to get made at the lowest possible level, right? That is reasonable. And so if you reverse order that and you use that to your advantage, you say, okay, what decisions can I make to help move that goal forward? Right? Like what can I do to move that goal forward? And then you just do that. And you do the small thing you can. And to your point, you build up credibility with your partners, with your leadership, and then you get more influence to move the ball forward more later.
And what would you say to those people who just say, don't know how to break things down to that level? Like give the people watching or listening to this some tips of just how to get started.
Well, my first response is kind of snarky, which is, Are you sure you're an engineer? Are you sure you're an engineer? Because like that's what engineers do. That's like half of like everything. Like that's how most software engineers' brains all work entirely that way. It's like, let me take this big problem and start to break it down into small pieces. But setting that aside, like I think go after the stuff you find interesting, right? Like find whatever it is that you can grasp. If you publicly traded company, listen to your CEO's, earnings calls, look at the press releases they put out, look at your internal communications, because leadership does put a lot of time into those things, and they seem stupid and shallow and sanitized, and they are, but they also have a lot of insight into what they actually care about. And so if you pay attention to those things, and then what resonates with you, right? Like it's back to caring. Like don't force yourself to go do something you don't actually care about. Like,
so you're saying if you don't care about VMs, you find something else that you can really sink your teeth into and come up with a way that you can be involved and engaged and dedicated to something because it matters to you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing. Like everybody says, you hear all this kind of cliche advice of like follow your bliss or, whatever chase your dreams, all those different things. Like I think a better version of that's slightly more practical is find the stuff you're interested in that has value, right? Like if it's useful and you're interested in it, that's a really good nexus.
It's
Chase
easy to
that.
be good with it. It's a greased pathway to be good at something because you're interested.
It's the key. It's the big. I mean, the psychologists, like the sports psychologists, all those guys, they'll all say the key thing to people becoming great at something is they have to be super interested in it. Because to be good at something, you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. You get super bored unless you're obsessed with it.
I'll never be in the NBA, but it's not because of my height. It's just because I don't care enough to be good at basketball. You'll never find me dribbling a basketball. I'll sling some code it until 12 o'clock at midnight, and because that's just something that resonates, and I've gotten good that way because it's a passion.
It's the whole like find stuff that's fun. Like find an interest. Like the other thing is the other piece of advice I'd give on this type of stuff when you're trying to affect change is you can't get frustrated. You have to find like I had a former boss, and you'll know who I'm talking about, and he'll know who I'm talking about if he listens to this. But like this guy loves the challenge of getting people to change. Like the game of it was more than half the fun for him, right? Like and the chess match of pushing here and pushing there and this and that and that was like all like half of his intrinsic value that he got from running large organizations was that stuff. And so it served him extremely well, right? Like it made him, he didn't get like, I'm a bit of a hothead, so I get all wound up about stuff, and I've gotten better as I gotten older, but he never got wound up about stuff. He would just be like, well, that's interesting, let's poke over here now. And it was
finding the rules.
It was really good for him.
Everything's a game. Yeah. Everything that we do is a game. You got to figure out what the rules are. The rules aren't given to you, but it's finding what rules you're playing by. Everything happens is just one of the rules you haven't found out yet.
Yeah, well, it's like Cynic's thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like Cynic's thing. It's the infinite game. And the metaphors he uses, it's like kids playing some game they're making up. And like if kids are making up a game, some play acting game, the point isn't to win. The point is to play the game.
Right.
Right. And I think that seems weird in like a corporate environment where it can be competitive and all those different things. But when you're working internally within the organization, like you winning against someone else, like use my example of the security architect that I would work with, like there's no me winning and him losing. Like if that's the orientation I take, I'm not going to win anything. I'm not going to get what I want ever.
Yeah, you can even simplify it down to even just being a parent, right? Because you get frustrated by your kid throwing the ball down and just dropping it on the floor over and over again. Like, what's going on? You're getting frustrated because they keep dropping the ball. That's not the game. The game is you. You are the game. And as soon as that's not fun anymore, they stop doing it because the whole point is to keep playing with you, not to throw the ball on the floor. That's the whole thing. And you can get frustrated over these situations, but looking back and zooming out, you are the toy. You are the game. Keep playing because that's what's fun. And simplifying it down to those simple scenarios is just figuring out what the rules are. Play by the rules. And sometimes make up your own and see what happens.
And like be open to the feedback, right? Like,
yeah,
and it's interesting you said that with the kids. Like I've also heard a similar thing be said about like in your marriage, right? Like if this guy I saw some clip on social media or whatever, and he's like, if you're trying to win an argument with your wife, you've already lost, because the best case scenario is that you win, which means she loses, which is not, which means you lose, right? And it's like, yeah, duh, obvious, but also that's true in almost every interaction. Like you don't want the other side to lose. You want a situation where everybody benefits. And again, it's like the cliche win-win, but it's more complicated. It's more sophisticated than that, in the sense of like, you have to set up to your point, to use your term, right? Like the game that advances everybody, right? Like if your big initiative or your big thing you're trying to do, let's bring pager duty in or whatever, and to put an on-call schedule together, to put paging and all this automation in, whatever you're going to do. And you're talking to, maybe there's some other team that you have to get on board to do that. You've got to give them a story to tell about how they're going to win with that too, right? Like there's got to be benefit on both sides. And if you can't find benefit on both sides, it's probably not a very good idea.
Right. You can steamroll a team and get your way. They walk away and then never want to work with you again. You may have won.
I don't know what you're talking about. That never happens.
Yeah, you can win the battle, but you lost the war, because now that team won't work with you ever again.
there's two funny stories on that. One's kind of what I will say is you do have to be careful. There is that 5% of people that are bad news bears, like that will lie. What I over the last 5 or 6 years, like I've been able to negotiate almost any situation successfully. The only ones where I ever got in trouble was when I'm dealing with people who lie, right? You know, lie about
really
their
happens,
stuff.
It seems like people who are listening, that does happen. You know, I've been party to those who have been just lying about something or just trying to puff their own chest to make themselves look better. It is a real thing that happens.
Yeah. It's crazy. There's posturing, which definitely happens. And then there's people will like, they will just say that things exist. They don't. And you're just like, bro, what are you talking about? Like, you're putting me in a situation where I'm just going to have to call you a liar to these people because like, you're saying something.
The reputational credit is going to be pretty high because of their position, their title. So people aren't going to want to question them. Even if everybody in the room thinks this is BS, well, who's going to be the first to challenge that person?
So the point of bringing that up, and there's more fun stories there, but we'll leave that for another day. The point of bringing that up is to say, like, hey, you do have to be careful. Like, if you're this is why you got to have a little bit of a spidey sense as you go to work with people and pick partners that you can truly ally with. That, you know, and that's why it's good to kind of look around and listen around, like, for people that are doing good work. Because it's not usually the people that are doing good work that are that way. It's people that are hiding the fact that they're a disaster. And so if they're doing good work, they're usually more trustworthy in general. And so that's something to kind of just keep an eye on, I would say. And then the other thing is, you know, and you know the story. So I along with that PagerDuty story, I'd been key to bringing in a big observability platform, which had been huge for us at one of these banks. And it was super successful and really helped improve the customer digital experience at the bank. And then, you know, probably about 2 years later, and we had skunkworksed it, right? Like we had done our own thing completely separate from the enterprise and all that type of stuff. And then about 2 years later, there was an enterprise work stream to unify all the observability platforms. There was multiple ones across the organization. And you know, they ended up not going with the one we went with. They went with a new one that, you know, they brought in. And there was a bunch of reasons for that. And it was, you know, whatever. But one of the things that was really interesting was my boss and I were able to take that thing that was kind of a repudiation of us. Again, if you get away from this winning zero-sum game, opportunities open up to you, because we were able to use that actually as a way, to your point about, you know, rebuilding human capital. At the end of that process, we were actually the first to transition over to the new platform. We got rid of ours in record time. And it was actually really good because we saved a bunch of people's jobs and stuff because there was a budget crunch and all these. There was a confluence of events, but it was one of those crazy things where we actually turned what should have been a loss in a zero-sum mindset into an enormous gain. Like every decision maker in that technology organization, from the CIO on down, was like, "Wow, these guys." Well, these guys are in it.
You're hitting a couple of things here. You know, typically what you see in an organization is people who don't want to admit. I don't want to say that you were wrong in that case for one of the tools, but it just wasn't the one that won. You could have dug your feet in and said, "No, this is right," even though maybe, you know, subconsciously you would have thought this probably isn't the right tool, but you didn't want to be wrong. So you turned that around and said, "Okay, you know what? You're right. This is the right tool to go with. We're going to go," and turning it into a win. But it takes a lot of trust, though, to be in an organization.
Gracious. To be fair, we weren't quite that gracious. We were like, "Hey, we don't necessarily agree with this, but we're going to disagree and commit and jump in." That's more what we did. But
it's close enough to what I'm trying to say is that you could have just dug your feet in. You could have said, "Okay, we're going to double down on this." And so I think there's a lot of people who are afraid to do that, afraid of getting egg on their face and admitting that they're wrong about something.
Yeah. I watch it, and the more senior people get, the harder it is for them to let things go. I actually wrote an essay once. I don't even know where it is at this point, but I sat down to write it because it drove me so crazy just to get the ideas out of my head. But it was basically around like the time value, or the like, understanding that every decision you make in technology is the wrong decision at some point, right? Like you don't know when it's going to be the wrong decision, but it will time out. It would be a bad idea. Building an app on COBOL in a mainframe is in 2025 pretty much universally a terrible idea. It was a great idea in 1992, right? And so like, if you can wrap your head around that and then just recognize that the pace of change is radically different today than it was back then. And
also different things matter in 2 years than now. You know, it could be a time where cost is the most important thing. okay, well, you're right. Based off of these metrics, these success criteria, vendor A is going to be the better vendor because this is the most important thing. It's all finding to the earlier point of what what matters? What are the things that matter? What do these individuals care about? How can we make sure that we're successful together versus trying to push through my agenda? Because those aren't necessarily the same things.
Totally. And that's why you have to make sure your agenda is linked to the top of the houses, because then you can pivot. You're not locked in because you're aligned to them, but then you're pivot. So like, for example, our agenda was observability being great. That was our agenda. We weren't locked to that tool. The tool was a mechanism with that. Once we got to a place where they brought in a tool that doesn't compromise, at least not too much, the overall strategic goal, we were able to make the change. And I mean, I always get disappointed in leaders when I see them be insecure about that pivot because it just makes them look small. Like that's the one thing. It's like, dude, I have never gotten more credit from a leadership standpoint than when I allow my mind to be changed by circumstance, right? Like now, I mean, that sounds like I'm a weather vane. I don't mean it that way. I mean like strong opinions loosely held, right? Like very strong opinions that are informed by information, by data and expertise and point of view and all those things. But when the circumstance changes, right. Yeah, when it changes, you rerun the model and you get a different result. And it's like, okay, let's go. And that somehow that's hard for most people, especially leaders. Somehow there's a belief that makes them look like they made the wrong decision, 12, 16, 18, 24, 36 months ago. And it's like, nah, like it doesn't, those are different things. Like make the decision, like if I was to judge myself or whatever, or you or whatever by, judge myself by actions that I did when I was 25 by the information and knowledge I have right now, like 90% of the stuff I did was just knuckleheaded stupidity, right? Like that's not, you can't do that. You have to judge the decision by the moment and the information you had. And the best, did you do the best you could with what you had? Or could you have seen something different? You still should be critical of those things, but you got to let the data change, basically. Thanks for the time today, bud. And thanks for anybody who's still listening. Hopefully it was helpful and we'll be back for more soon. Thanks. That's a wrap for this episode of Tech Council brought to you by DevGrid. Thanks for joining us as we dive into building smarter solutions for the enterprise. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, leave us a rating, and share your thoughts on X, at DevGrid Inc., or at devgrid.io. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore more ways to thrive in the enterprise. Until then, keep building.